So I'm very pleased now. I think we've got Jennifer Buffett hooked up and ready to go. It is an absolute pleasure to have Jennifer Buffett with us. We'll wait until she appears on the screen anytime now. I could probably just talk about Jennifer Buffett, and she will join us when she does. So every year we've been very fortunate to have the Novo Foundation involved. And it started off in Toronto when Pamela Schiffman, who leads the girls' files for Jennifer Buffett and the Novo Foundation, came to Toronto, and she was a panelist. And Pamela was another person. I'm going to sound like a terrible person, but Pamela was another person that I stalked from event to event to event, handed her my card and sort of said, we'd really like you to be part of the Girls 20 Summit. And she showed up, and we learned a lot about the Novo Foundation. And during that time, it came to light that the Novo Foundation is very strategic in how they spend not just their resources, but the time of their founder, and how they use their platform to talk about issues in partnership with other organizations that maybe would not necessarily get that kind of attention. So Jennifer Buffett's the president and the co-chair of the Novo Foundation. She's joining us from New York City. I'm now going to stretch and tell you a little bit more about Jennifer. I met Jennifer, I guess the last time I met her was in New York City again at the CGI meeting that was put on by the UN, I think it was the UN Foundation. Oh, hi, Jennifer. I was just about to tell stories about you.
Okay.
Thanks very much for joining us. It's early in New York City, I guess is where you're beaming in from.
I am, yeah. It's not too early, though.
Oh, okay.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Well, thank you very much. I was just explaining a little bit about Novo Foundation and how you guys have been with us from the start, and how I sort of stalked Pamela Schiffman and had her come to Toronto, and then she joined us in Mexico City, and we're so incredibly pleased to have you with us and to talk to the delegates. You've got a group assembled of young women who are 18 to 20 years of age, who come from 21 different countries, and who are so eager to figure out what can they do with respect to child marriage. So I was just going to say that, you are a passionate advocate for girls. You serve on the board of the Nike Foundation, and you promote the Girl Effect, which they are now familiar with. And so we're coming to you from Moscow. The floor is yours. Please maybe just say a few words about the Novo Foundation, and then we're going to jump into questions.
Sure. Well, hello, everyone. I was watching the panel before this one. I was just so impressed, and I can feel the energy all the way from Moscow to here. And I'm so sorry I'm not with you. Next year, I will be there wherever it is, I promise. But thank you so much for having me. The Novo Foundation was born in stages. I started working in philanthropy in 1999, 14 years ago, with a relatively small amount of money, $100,000, that got me out in my community. And this was from my husband's family, and they gave us a Christmas gift of this fund, and we could spend it on a nonprofit organization, NGO, 501c3. We didn't know what that was. However we wanted. We could write one check or many, many checks. And I was a journalism major. I was always curious and wanted to know how things work. So I sort of put myself into places and areas in the city where I grew up in Milwaukee, where I was living at the time, that I had not spent a lot of time with, in different communities of color, in the disabilities community, in all different kind of communities that were maybe not where I grew up, but I felt I really needed to learn about. And immediately, for some reason, thought about philanthropy in terms of systems and our society, and why were some people able to have access to education, good schools, good jobs, and things like that, and other people maybe just across a river were not? Why was that? And so my philanthropy, again, got me out, and there's nothing better than, I think, in your work than experience and putting yourself right into the thick of things to learn with humility, and to really listen to people to find out how things were working and where things, frankly, fall apart. So I've had 14 years of traveling. I started in Milwaukee in a small location, and then went out and started working nationally, worked in indigenous communities, worked with adolescent girls in poverty who were first-time mothers. Interestingly enough, that has carried through my work at the Novo Foundation, and then started to work and travel around the world to slums of Mumbai and Bangladesh, to urban and rural communities all over Africa, and just to learn and see again, what are the systems at work in the world that are maybe not working for us anymore, and how do we change them, and who will be the agents of change. And the conclusion that we came to after many years, again, of study, of travel, of listening, is that girls are going to be those agents of change. We absolutely believe that. We live in a world, unfortunately, that's been based on domination and exploitation of people, of places, of things that we want, of resources, and rampant competition. And I think that paradigm needs to change. And we see this playing out between the genders. You all know this. We do not have gender equity or equality between the genders. And frankly, until that changes, I think that paradigm is going to continue in the world. And I think problems, wars, shortages and things like this are only going to escalate if we don't shift that partnership paradigm by empowering and elevating and supporting the girls and women of this world.
So on that note, as you know, one of our tasks is to come together, build up our skills, hear from speakers like yourself about a number of different issues. And this year we've chosen the eradication of child marriage. And we're doing that in the perspective of if we do not eradicate child marriage, there's a serious opportunity lost. We all know the numbers. The delegates have heard from Nyardzai, they heard from Lakshmi, and they heard from Kenya. So they know the sort of facts and figures. But I think what is really important is, you have resources, you have a platform. You could choose any issue that any issue you want to. So tell me, was it a moment? Was it a story? Was it a friend who sort of said, Jennifer, this is an important issue and one that you can make an impact on? Maybe you could tell us a little bit about why the Novo Foundation and yourself have put this so high up on the priority list.
Yeah, great question. Again, it was experiential, and the opportunity also came. But there were so many places that I would visit where I would see girls, some of them very engaged and whatnot, and I would see maybe a group of girls off to the side, or who were hidden if we went to other parts of a village or something, and I saw a big difference. And what I kept seeing when I asked, why do these girls feel or seem more withdrawn, or why are they not in school? And the answer was so often because they're married. They're married, and this is it. They have been, and they're not in a healthy relationship. They have become it was a transaction where they were not able to be in their families of origin. There weren't resources to keep them in school, and so they were married off. And it just became glaringly obvious, place after place, that this was then going to further a cycle of poverty, because these girls were children, and the girls were dying in childbirth because they were too young to bear children. And, I just became outraged. I thought, this is just derailing generations of girls, whether they be individuals or we know it's 14 million girls or so a year, that we cannot afford, that we will lose, that could be healthy contributors, in the world, to their families, their communities, and that this really needed to change. It was a huge, we were calling it sort of trap door or problem in the system, in thinking that, again, I just saw so many problems as a result of it, and such unfairness, frankly, that to think that, it's interesting. I have a twin brother, so I think of myself as sort of a living gender experiment. And even in the United States, because I was, and there's 2 girls in our family and 2 boys. The boys, oddly enough, had businesses. They got insurance. They got to go to college. They had, they didn't have to work as hard in the summer. My sister and I had to put ourselves through college. I've worked since I was 14. These things have built up my skills and my knowledge of how to take care of myself, how to work in the world. So I'm grateful for those things, but there was a huge difference. And when I was going to college, and I was a very serious student, my parents were splitting up, and my dad came to me and had a very difficult conversation. He said, I'm going to take the boys, your mother's going to take the girls, and I'm not going to be able to pay for your college tuition. And I was horrified. I didn't understand it, and just ripped apart from this. And I said, Dad, why? And he said, you're only going to get married anyway. Why should I invest in you? And that, to me, when you talk about what the aha moment, that actually seed lived in me to this day, and does. that I've been perceived as, what about the contributions that I want to make in my life? And then in building my skills and abilities and contributions in the world. Even in my country, in the United States, this attitude exists. And I had just plowed ahead, but when I traveled around the world and I saw the same attitude again and again, yet with women that I had met who had this had happened to at age 4 and 5 and 6 years old. I mean, can you imagine a 4-year-old not having a clue what was happening to her? Mm-hmm. Her life just sort of ending at that moment. It was just a huge moment for me. And then when Girls Not Brides campaign and the leadership started to form around this, I thought, we have to be involved in this. This is a moment, and we have to be involved. So that's why the Novo Foundation is passionately, heavily invested for as long as it takes to really sort of crack open this issue, elevate this discussion, and really shift this so this doesn't happen to girls in our world.
So first of all, thank you for sharing such a personal story. I mean, I think that really helps the delegates understand that no matter where you come from, everyone has challenges and opportunities, and you obviously turned yours into an opportunity. I'm going to turn it over to the delegates for questions in a few minutes, but one of the things that I wonder if you could tell us is, if we are truly going to end the practice of early child marriage, what do you think the priorities are? I mean, we've heard that education is important, and you've talked a lot about traveling around the world and seeing different perspectives. You're a very successful businesswoman. You have a very passionate philanthropic background. From the perspective of having seen with your own eyes what could actually be done, what do you think the priority is if we're really gonna stop this in our lifetime? Now, keep in mind, I'm 42, so I'm gonna hang on for a little longer. But truly, tell us a little bit about what you think really are the we must do this if we're going to go to this point.
Well, I think, Vera, I want to thank you for your work with G20 because you're in the sweet spot of it, and I think it is by bringing voice and consciousness and awareness to the issue and to girls, because I think girls have been primarily separated and invisible, and until that shifts with some of the, for example, G20 predominantly male global leaders, where they don't even think about adolescent girls, they're not thinking about girl children, the world that we have presently will continue, will be allowed to continue. And if we're going to shift this, girls are going to have to become visible, and they're going to have voice, and they're going to have to be able to share, whether it be through social network, the ability we have through social networks, video, writing, speaking, the reality and the stories of girls and women. That is not living in the consciousness of the world. What is the reality, and what are the life experiences of girls and women, and what does that mean, and what are the contributions we want to make? What's the world we want to create? I don't feel like that things can change until that awareness is really brought to the fore and fought for, and it is challenging the existing sort of paradigm and stories in the world. Education is incredibly important. Economic ability and stability, so that families are not forced to choose. If I send my son to school, what do I do with my daughter? I love her. I'd love her to stay in school, but I have no choice. I have to marry her off. Things like this are very real. Cultural fears around, will my daughter be married if I delay marriage? I mean, it's so complex. What we're talking about here is so complex. But I think, again, the opportunity and the priority really needs to be to elevate the stories, the realities, the importance of girls and what's happening to girls as a result of them not being in the dominant conversation.
Well, you've given me a nice segue to go to our delegates for them to use their voice to ask their questions to you. So we're going to start with Morgan from Canada.
Hi. So you talk a lot about systems, which I find fascinating, and I'm wondering, taking today's topic of child marriage, what exactly changes about the problems but also the solutions when you adopt a systematic approach to these issues?
Ask me that again. Because I really want to be thoughtful about the answer.
Well, you mentioned that when you were first examining issues of gender, you took a journalistic approach, you took a systems approach, and which I'm very curious about. And I'm asking, what exactly changes about both the problems and the solutions, and what exactly this means in terms of taking a systematic approach?
Yeah, well, I think we have to look at the systems and how they're set up in terms of the imbalances. So again, if we're looking, pick a system, our education system, and what is happening there that is favoring boys, or where assets or resources, or just the alignment of that entire education system where there's the inequities. So it's not just individual sort of people or cases. And then I think, systems of political systems, the inequity of representation, of family and community systems. Again, just not going in and saying, this is sort of an individual problem and going and, thinking that they're isolated incidences. It's taking a step back and looking at the entire ecosystem and forces at work in a holistic way to see where you can meet people where they are, where the needs are, so that you're not trying to sort of force, sort of like, here's an intervention, now here's the effect we work. I heard somebody talking earlier about the linearity of things. We live in a world that is very linked. Everything is connected, right? And so I think it is up to us, especially as leaders and philanthropists, to understand the very complex ecosystems and systems and different levels of realities and things at play. Again, in the issue of child marriage, there are attitudinal realities. There are family systems. There are economic realities. There's economic systems that have fallen apart. And girls are getting a raw deal, and this is resulting in girls being married off and all sorts of hosts of bad things. What's happening in our health system that could actually support promoting girls staying in school longer and marrying when they choose and having babies later in life when their bodies are ready, fully ready for that, and they have the support. That's what I'm talking about.
Jennifer, I'm going to jump in there before I go to Linda for her question. What you've just described, this holistic approach and how it's important to sort of connect the dots, is exactly what we're trying to do in Girls 20. If you look at our partnership list, we have people who are from I call it social profit sector, the private sector, and then government and foundations. And I think you're absolutely right. If you don't bring all these players together and systematically you take a chunk of the pie and you say, look, we're most effective on this, you work on that, but let's understand what each of us are doing, then it is silo work. We have many different partners. One of our partners is here with us today, and it's a new partner with us, and it's Caterpillar. And we had talked to them about what we try to achieve and what we try to do, and they immediately said, look, from our perspective, we actually need to make sure that we have a robust workforce to go to in the future. Well, that ties back to, if you take a 14.2 million girls out of the system, that workforce has just come to be a little bit smaller, or a hell of a lot smaller. And so, I think the question's a fantastic one, because it's not just about Jennifer Buffett, who has an amazing platform. It's Jennifer Buffett who says, I can galvanize people, but I'm not going to do it alone, because it's more effective if I have the private sector. If I have the social profit sector, if the academic sector understands that there is a role to play, and the media. This has become such a huge issue now in the media. And yes, it's because people like Desmond Tutu and President Clinton and others have rallied around this. And you just hope that this doesn't become a trendy issue, that it stays. And the only way that it stays is, in fact, what you've just said, which is it has to be systemic. It has to be multi-pronged. So enough of Farah's way of the world, but I'll turn the mic over to Linda, because she's itching to get up, and then we'll get back to you, Jennifer.
Hi, I'm Linda, and I'm the delegate representing Australia. So I had two sort of questions today. The first one was, what kind of criteria does the Novo Foundation use to determine which projects are best worthy of funding? And furthermore, can you name a particular project but the methods of which you really admire and you think that it poses best practice for development studies and development policy?
Great question. The criteria is we are not, like many foundations, a responsive foundation where people send us applications and then we sort through sort of a competitive process, the best ones. We've been very thoughtful and taken our time, or decided to take our time, about what are all our assets. Farah just named one. I think it's really important that philanthropists can play as a convener. we have a platform, we can open doors, we can get to certain people in the government sector, in the private sector, whatnot. Those are huge assets besides the money that we feel like we have in our toolbox that we really need to use. We really feel like we have, you know, compared to resources in the world, just a little bit of resources to do something. So how could we maximize those resources? So our thinking in terms of criteria has been, we see so clearly the imbalance between the genders. We see that the world's girls need to be invested in, need to be valued. We need to get the word out that we cannot lose all that girls will bring to the world, which will be ended by things like child marriage and trafficking and things like that. It's too large a contribution, too important a contribution to lose. But who can we partner with, and what can we do? What needs to be done in order to move that ball down the field, so to speak, in order to advance that? So we went searching, and there, through serendipity and through places like CGI where we met Farah, other convenings, we found other partners that could take pieces of this and together, like the Nike Foundation, bring very compelling communications and media to the issue to elevate it. And then we worked very intentionally to say, okay, if we're going to do this, if we have a shot at this, we need to work with grassroots girls. We need to get girls as part of this movement and energized. And we also have to get places like the World Bank and heads of state and, you know, the G20 countries, whatever, to understand the issue as well. So the criteria for us was self-imposed, but we always try to think, if we're going to make a difference, what are the sort of levels, again, in the ecosystem of things that need to happen or people that need to be reached or be brought on board, and what are the things that need to be done that maybe are not there, that we can bring to the fore in terms of, again, communications, building a portfolio of what, for example, in the girls' work, we have a portfolio of fantastic girl projects around the world that we're trying to bolster so that we can say to the world, this is what we know girls need in these settings, this is pretty much what it costs, and these are the benefits of these things. There's a lot to learn there about what girls need, and then to amplify girls' voices themselves. So this is a whole strategy. As we learn, we continue to iterate, get the feedback from our learning, and then look for opportunities to move our resources and hopefully unlock other dollars and other potential. So that's a very different way of working, but I would say that is how we've formulated our thinking and looked at this opportunity thus far.
And I think, Jennifer, I'll go back to the delegates for another question if they have one, but you know, I'm struck by the fact that what you've just described, I don't know if you remember this breakfast, but in September, yourselves, the Ford Foundation, the UN Foundation, and I think it was Mrs. Sabanci, the Sabanci Foundation, had a breakfast. And it was in New York. It was probably, you know, I mean, you're in New York, and this is CGI, and there are tons of events to go to, and there are celebrities everywhere. And that room was packed. I mean, it was standing room only. And the reason for that is because you do have all of these people who are gathered around this issue, and you managed to bring in, and I don't know the relationship, and perhaps you can elaborate a little bit on the relationship with Mrs. Sabanci from Turkey, but you know, there we had a new voice, and just by bringing in a voice that it was not North American, I think was a really nice eye-opener. And to your point about the funding, you know, what I like is that it's not just up to one organization. It is so much stronger when an organization says, I'll put X, but it's not just dollars. You know, we always say we're not a checkbook philanthropy. Girls 20 is not a checkbook philanthropy organization. If there's no content, we don't want the money. Because those two things really need to come together. But I might put you on the spot and just ask you to elaborate on how you brought this this partnership to fruition between the Ford Foundation, yourselves, and the Sabanci Foundation, and I believe the UN Foundation was involved as well. I remember Kathy Calvin being in the room and being a go-getter on that one.
Exactly. You know, that breakfast, ladies, felt like a significant turning point in this issue. I mean, with so many issues at a time in New York City in September, when there's so much going on at the UN with different philanthropic convenings on different issues, to have a packed room, and it was a fairly large room in New York City, with men, women of all different sort of backgrounds from different countries, from different foundations, saying this is important and speaking so passionately at 7 in the morning about it. I felt like, you know what, we've hit a moment, we've hit something in the consciousness. People are understanding the connections of this. Farah, thank you for giving me credit for bringing all those people together. That was not me at all, but we were early investors in Girls Not Brides, and with the elders, who Mary Robinson and Desmond Tutu in particularly really stepped up. They traveled, they talked with girls, went to places where early marriage is really a problem and affecting a large portion of the girls in that region, did their homework, and could speak so eloquently and powerfully and passionately. And the world knows, out of all the issues, you know, for them to choose this and say this is important, people took notice. Yep. And so I think it's the combination of when resources and powerful people and powerful voice and the diversity of those things, I think, shows up, people take notice. Yep.
I think Linda has a follow-up question, and then we're going to have a time for one more from Jenny from the U.S., and then we're going to have to wrap it up, though we could keep you here all day.
Sorry, just to return to the second half of my question. I'm a development studies major, so I'm really interested in learning about like what kind of methods are the best practice for achieving outcomes. Do you believe that sort of grassroots action is more effective, or do you believe that top-down action coming from expert knowledge is more effective?
I mean, I think it depends what you're trying to achieve, at what level and what scale. My instinct in answering your question and my approach and the values here of the Nova Foundation is always to approach humbly at the grassroots and talk to people that are affected by whatever issue or in a place, because there's nobody better in terms of an expert than someone who's living in a geographic location or living something where an issue is playing out that you're curious about. And that, rather than somebody in a university thousands of miles away who's just focusing on this one element of a problem, it just almost seems ridiculous that we could solve things that way. We may as well be on the moon. I think so. Our approach and things that we feel have been effective or are effective always must have large components of the design where you're working with the people that you're serving or involving or who are closest to the issue on the grassroots, and they have heavy involvement and input and feedback. It's key. I hope that's helpful.
Okay, so I'm going to get in trouble with the producers, but we're going to go for 2 more questions, but we're going to be really quick questions because I'd also like to come back to another delegate, and then we're going to let Jennifer go reluctantly. So please, Jenny.
Hi, I'm Jenny from the U.S., and my question has to do with the systems approach you talked about. As a sociology major, what we talk about often is globalization, and in terms of addressing issues from a systematic approach, it's becoming more and more difficult as the world gets more globalized. So I'm just wondering if you can give us some advice or just your knowledge on how you've navigated your systematic approach in consideration with the world moving at a much faster pace and problems having roots much deeper and varied than many of us experts can sit down and address.
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry to be sort of brief on these things. These are such great questions that we could speak on all day, so I'm not giving you perfect answers, but I think about this all the time. And one of the guiding principles of Novo, and just myself and my husband, and I think it's really important that you understand the worldview that you hold and how you're showing up to the world, how you view it. One of the main things or ways that my husband and I agree, and there's evidence, unfortunately, everywhere about this, is that we do live in a world based on, I had said it earlier, domination and exploitation of one another, of people that are weaker. There's a term, manifest destiny, where it's sort of like God's right of kings, if you're more powerful, to be able to take what you want and have dominion over people, over nature. These are ideas that live in the collective unconscious that are, globalization's like, well, we want to go further and further afield for resources and things like that. We will run out of time and resources at some point. We cannot continue to live within that sort of systematic reality. We need to shift our consciousness somehow to be working much more in cooperation and collaboration with nature, with natural systems, with one another, and learn how to partner and to be sort of creatively engaged in getting ourselves out of a lot of the messes we've created. So I think about that a lot, and again, I really feel like if we can be partners, the genders can bring all of their gifts, and so many of the things, we haven't talked about this, but that I feel are so important in women and girls' lives and realities in their empowerment is that bringing sort of the feminine energy and knowing and wisdom to the equation. We all have masculine and feminine inside of us, but the masculine is overvalued and I think has been sort of valued over the more feminine qualities in men and in women and in the planet. And so that's why we're also heavily investing in changing those gender dynamics and going for that parity. Also to build the capacities of human beings when there are systems that seem too ominous and too big to be able to sort of tackle. I mean, capitalism and globalism and all these things. I think if you can build individual capacities in people to hold on to their compassion, to their empathy, to be able to work creatively and well, and this is what you are all about in terms of building your self-awareness, your skills in leadership, and how to manage relationships, how to work through conflict, how to work through very difficult problems. I think we need that. I think that's an antidote to today's society more than ever. And I think we need to, this is another big area of work that we're doing at the Novo Foundation, is to think about how we're raising our children. Are we raising our children to be selfish and competitive and, you know, give me the formula so I can go get the job and the money and all this stuff and take over the world? Is that what we're raising in children? Or are we raising children who are holding on to their capacities to be compassionate, empathic, to see how wrong it would be in the example of child marriage to marry a 5-year-old girl that would then be your sort of servant and slave, and you would, you know, derail her life and take away her human rights and her dignity. You know, no, you know what? So I think, again, I think it's important to think about systems, but it's really also important to build human capacities of love, compassion, empathy, understanding, and we'll see what happens in the evolution of the planet if that's enough.
So now we're going to put to test one of our delegates, Maria, who they had communications PR training given by Mikhailov and partners. So we're going to put you to the test. Ask your question very, very specifically. And quickly, please, because we do need to let Jennifer go. And Jennifer, I obviously have marked down, and we've recorded the part where you said you'd be in Australia in person next year. You've given us obviously a lot of reason to do that. Please ask your question.
Okay, I'm Maggie from Argentina. I have a very short question. I think it's more like personal or opinion. Seeing all these great organizations that you are creating that are existing, and I think like most of us, we want to travel also, see the world with our eyes and do something. Like, why it took you to create something new or to establish your own organization instead of joining one that is already existing?
We actually have joined many that are existing. There's just sort of new collaboratives or new work that we've been a part of to help elevate their work. So I agree with you. Why go start things that are new unless they don't exist and they need to? But what we've done is looked at the whole, you know, if we wanted to move the issue of girls forward, which we did and we do, we would just investing money in existing organizations take us to where we want to go? And the answer was no. We need to work much more creatively in terms of communications, messaging, work with the, you know, sort of halls of power, work systemically, work to do research to find out and call out really what really works for girls, while certainly supporting lots of amazing organizations, existing organizations, because they've been holding the wisdom and that knowledge, and they deserve to be, you know, bolstered and whatnot. We haven't gone and created something new in terms of organizations that already exist.
Jennifer, thank you so very much on behalf of the delegates. They are going to have a very big task ahead of them tomorrow as they look at all the information that they have been able to glean from the speakers. You were absolutely fantastic, your energy and your passion and your very clean office. But listen, thank you so much for joining us. We will come after you for Australia. So thank you.
I can't wait to be there. I've heard such amazing things about you all ladies. I look forward to meeting you around the world soon enough. You're already doing amazing things, and your questions were fantastic, and your desire. And, you know, when I was growing up in your age, there wasn't a generation like you. So I look at you and say, you hold the answers. You have everything going for you. Now just support one another and go for it. Thank you so much.